Chapter 2 of A Man of Means. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tim Bulkley of BigBible.org. A Man of Means by P.G. Woodhouse and C.H. Boville. The episode of The Financial Napoleon. Seated with his wife at breakfast on the veranda which overlooked the rolling lawns and leafy woods of his charming Sussex home, Geoffrey Windlebird, the great financier, was enjoying the morning sun to the full. His chubby features were relaxed in a smile of lazy contentment, and his wife, who liked to act sometimes as his secretary, found it difficult to get him to pay any attention to his morning's mail. "There's a column in today's Financial Argus," she said, "of which you really must take notice. It's most abusive. It's about the Wildcat Reef. They assert that there never was any gold in the mine, and that you knew it when you floated the company." "They will have their little joke." "But you had the usual mining expert's report." "Of course we had. And a capital report it was. I remember thinking at the time, what a neat turn of phrase the fellow had. I admit he depended rather on his fine optimism than on any examination of the mine. As a matter of fact, he never went near it. And why should he? It's down in South America somewhere. Awful climate, snakes, mosquitoes, revolutions, fever." Mr. Windlebird spoke drowsily, his eyes closed. "Well, the Argus people say that they've sent a man of their own out there to make inquiries, a well-known expert, and the report will be in within the next fortnight. They say they will publish it in their next number but one. What are you going to do about it?" Mr. Windlebird yawned. "Not to put too fine a point on it, dearest, the game is up. The Napoleon of finance is about to meet his Waterloo. And all for £20,000. That is the really bitter part of it. Tomorrow we'd sail for the Argentine. I've got the tickets." "You're joking, Geoffrey. You must be able to raise 20,000. It's a flea bite." "On paper, in the form of shares, scrip, bonds, promissory notes, it is a flea bite. But when it has to be produced in the raw, in flat, hard lumps of gold, or in crackling bank notes, it's more like a bite from a hippopotamus. I can't raise it, and that's all about it. So, St. Helena for Napoleon." Although Geoffrey Windlebird described himself as a Napoleon of finance, a Cinquevalli or Chung Lee Soo of finance would have been a more accurate title. As a juggler with other people's money, he was at the head of his class. And yet, when one came to examine it, his method was delightfully simple. Say, for instance, that the home-grown tobacco trust, founded by Geoffrey in a moment of ennui, failed to yield those profits which the glowing prospectus had led the public to expect. Geoffrey would appease the excited shareholders by giving them preference shares, interest guaranteed, in the Sea Gold Extraction Company, hastily floated to meet the emergency. When the interest became due, it would, as likely as not, be paid out of the capital just subscribed for the King Solomon's Mines Exploitation Association, the little deficiency in the latter being replaced in its turn, when absolutely necessary and not a moment before, by the transfer of some portion of the capital just raised for yet another company, and so on ad infinitum. There were moments when it seemed to Mr. Windlebird that he had solved the problem of perpetual promotion. The only thing that can stop a triumphal progress like Mr. Windlebird's is when some coarse person refuses to play to the rules and demands ready money instead of shares in the next venture. This had happened now, and it had flattened Mr. Windlebird like an avalanche. He was a philosopher, but he could not help feeling a little galled that the demand which had destroyed him had been so trivial. He had handled millions. On paper, it was true. But still, millions. And here he was, knocked out of time by a paltry £20,000. "Are you absolutely sure that nothing can be done?" persisted Mrs. Windlebird. "Have you tried every one?" "Every one, dear. Moon of my delight. The probables, the possibles, the highly unlikelies, and the impossibles. Never an echo to the minstrel's wooing song. No, my dear, we have got to take to the boats this time, unless, of course, someone possessed at one and the same time of £20,000 and of very confiding nature happens to drop from the clouds." As he spoke, an aeroplane came sailing over the tops of the trees beyond the tennis lawn. Gracefully as a bird, it settled on the smooth turf not 20 yards from where he was seated. Roland Bleke stepped stiffly out onto the tennis lawn. His progress rather resembled that of a landsman getting out of an open boat in which he has spent a long and perilous night at sea. He was feeling more wretched than he had ever felt in his life. He had a severe cold. He had a splitting headache. His hands and feet were frozen. His eyes smarted. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He hated cheerful Monsieur Feriot, who had hopped out and was now busy tinkering the engine, a gay Provençal air on his lips, as he had rarely hated anyone, even Muriel Coppin's brother Frank. So absorbed was he that he was not aware of Mr. Windlebird's approach until that pleasant, portly man's shadow fell on the turf before him. "Not had an accident, I hope, Mr. Bleke?" Roland was too far gone in misery to speculate as to how this genial stranger came to know his name. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Windlebird, keen student of the illustrated press, had recognized Roland by his photograph in the Daily Mirror. In the course of the 20 yards walk from the house to the tennis lawn, she had put her husband into possession of the more salient points of Roland's history. It was when Mr. Windlebird had heard that Roland had £40,000 in the bank that he sat up and took notice. "Lead me to him," he said simply. Roland sneezed. "No accident, thank you," he replied miserably. "Something's gone wrong with the works, but it's nothing serious, worse luck." Monsieur Feriot, having by this time adjusted the defect in his engine, rose to his feet and bowed. "Excuse if we come down on your lawn, but not long do we trespass. See, mon ami," he said radiantly to Roland. "All now O.K. We go." "No," said Roland decidedly. "No? What do you mean, no?" A shade of alarm fell on Monsieur Feriot's weather-beaten features. The eminent birdman did not wish to part from Roland. Toward Roland he felt like a brother, for Roland had notions about payment for little aeroplane rides which bordered upon the princely. "But you say, take me to France with you." I know, but it's all off. I'm not feeling well." "But it's all wrong." Monsieur Feriot gesticulated to drive home his point. "You give me £100 to take you away from Lexingham. Good. It is here." He slapped his breast pocket. "But other £200, which you also promise to pay me when I place you safe in France. Where is that, my friend?" "I will give you 250," said Roland earnestly, "to leave me here and go right away and never let me see your beastly machine again." A smile of brotherly forgiveness lit up Monsieur Feriot's face. The generous Gallic nature asserted itself. He held out his arms affectionately to Roland. "Ah, now you talk. Now you say something," he cried in his impetuous way. "Embrace me. You are all right." Roland heaved a sigh of relief when 5 minutes later the aeroplane disappeared over the brow of the hill. Then he began to sneeze again. "You're not well, you know," said Mr. Windlebird. "I've caught cold. We've been flying about all night. That French ass lost his bearings, and my suit is thin. Can you direct me to a hotel?" "Hotel? Nonsense!" Mr. Windlebird spoke in the bluff, breezy voice which at many a stricken board meeting had calmed frantic shareholders as if by magic. "You're coming right into my house and up to bed this instant." It was not until he was between the sheets, with a hot water bottle at his toes and a huge breakfast inside him, that Roland learned the name of his good Samaritan. When he did, his first impulse was to struggle out of bed and make his escape. Geoffrey Windlebird's was a name which he had learned in the course of his mercantile career to hold in something approaching reverence as that of one of the mightiest business brains of the age. To have to meet so eminent a man in the capacity of invalid, a nuisance about the house, was almost too much for Roland's shrinking nature. The kindness of the Windlebirds, and there seemed to be nothing that they were not ready to do for him, distressed him beyond measure. To have a really great man like Geoffrey Windlebird sprawling genially over his bed, chatting away as if he were an ordinary friend, was almost horrible. Such condescension was too much. Gradually, as he became convalescent, Roland